Hi, welcome to painting linen magnolias with art by you in Mudgee. I'll take this one away and we'll start painting. My tracing has already been done and we're ready to go. We're going to be doing step-by-step instructions for your masterpiece. Now, using the big brush and the brown paint, we're going to fill in the thicker branch and the smaller twigs with the thinner brush. Fill them in as you feel you need to. And if you want to add a thicker layer of paint over the top, go ahead and do that. Now I'm painting with the side of my brush as I go up the thinner part of the branch or the stem. You can also fill in here where the bud form is. And remember to switch over to your thinner brush if you need it to get into those smaller areas. If you need to go over twice with the paint to your desired thickness, go ahead and do that. I'll leave a little bit of time. And so pressing lightly with the brush sideways as you go into the thinner areas, or use your smaller brush and just use the tips. Just the tip of your brush without pressing too hard on the canvas so that you can get those lovely thin lines. You'll need a cloth and a water cup. I'm going to use my thin brush now with the white paint to paint some highlight areas down the length of the branch and twigs. And you can also do the same with the yellow paint down the branches and the twigs, and then you rinse and damp dry both your brushes. I'll go ahead and do that and then allow some time in the video. With the lines and the highlights, we have a light side on the branch and then a darker side. So I'm not going to draw the line all the way up. I'm just going to place touches of my white paint every now and then, just to add a little bit of dimension and form to suggest that the twigs are rounded. To create that rounded shape, we have a light side, the highlighted side, and a dark side. Now I'll go ahead with my yellow paint. Just touches heavy now and then. It's not a stripe all the way down the branch or twig. It's just a little bit to suggest some dimension and a roundness. I'll give you a bit of time to finish that part. And now that you've done that part, you can go ahead and do some green into the bud forms on the larger magnolia flower and the smaller one as well. Use the thin brush to just paint some green highlights into those bud forms. So don't completely go over the brown that's already there. It's just a suggestion. And we'll wash both brushes. And dampen them dry with the rag. You can use paper towel or an old cloth. A dishcloth is fine as long as it's dry to begin with, so that it can take the dampness out of your brushes. Now we're going to use the big brush and our white paint to fill in the magnolia petals. I'll start with the large magnolia and we can move on to the smaller bud on the right hand side of the canvas. Be quite generous with the white paint. Paint it fairly thickly, particularly on the edges of the petals. You want to go over your pencil tracing lines as well. So if you need to paint a couple of layers, I'll give you a bit of time for that. So just trace the shapes where you've already drawn in the pencil tracing. So we're tracing the shape with the white paint now to fill in. This is called blocking in the colour, and then to add our details in later. So I'm going to go over the edges of my petal with a blobby kind of shape with the white paint, just to make sure that I'm being very generous with my layers of white, and to suggest that lushness of the lovely thick magnolia petals. The next step will be to add our crimson. So I'll allow a bit of time for you to fill in the white petals first. So just dab that white onto the edge of the petals. And then scrape the rest of the white off onto the edge of your white pot and give your brush a wash out. Rinse the brush off. Dampen it dry again with the cloth. And we're going to use the big brush to paint crimson onto the magnolia petals. So use your big brush to take a full paint load full and start down the base of the petal closest to where the centre of the flower is, so the base of the petal, and we're going to drag it to 2/3 of the way up that first large petal, and again and again. So I've done 3 strokes so far. I'm going to start again at the base of that petal and drag up in between the spaces where I've missed. And then I've done 4 strokes and then 5 strokes. And I'm going to leave that as is with the crimson, just stopping abruptly 2/3 of the way up the white petal. And I'm going to do my other petals as well. I'm going to go to the right of the large flower and do that wonky petal that's falling off to the side and follow the curve of that petal around. Just 1 or 2 strokes on that one. And then this petal on the side, and on the left hand side I'll do the same. Just 1 stroke up. And then I'm going to use the mixed amount that's from my brush of white and crimson to go part way into this petal that's in between the others on the right hand side. And just do that lovely blending as the crimson turns into pink. So that was 3 or 4 strokes on that right hand petal at the top. And then the petal that's at the very top, I've still got that mixed pink, crimson and white colour on my big brush, and I'm just blending it into the white paint that's already there. Now I'm going to blend some of that white and pink colour that's still on my brush and soften some of these pinker marks that are here on this main petal. Just blend them in a little bit with soft brush strokes with the tip of my brush. And I'm going to leave the tip of the petal quite white. And I'm blending in this right hand side petal as well. Now that flower, the large magnolia, is finished. Now Now I'm going to use some of the crimson that's still on my brush and do the bud on the right hand side. Start at the base of the petal and drag it 3/4 of the way up. And then I'm going to flip my brush over and start at the base and 3/4 of the way up. I've just done 2 strokes on that bud so far, and I'm going to do 1 more next to each stroke that I've already done, following the curve of the petal as it moves around. Now I'm going to wash off the excess paint from my brush. And I'm going to blend some of those edges with the white paint again. So I've cleaned my big brush, put more white paint on, and gone back in a different direction to blend some of the softness of the crimson as it turns pink onto each petal. You can touch your brush lightly onto the canvas and go very softly with the edges. So move the tips of the big paintbrush back and forth to blend those crimson into the white. And you can do the same on the large flower if you want to. I feel like mine's mostly finished, so I'll probably leave it as is. Rinse the brush and then dampen it dry. Now we're moving on to the background. We're going to use the big brush again to mix a full brush of crimson paint and a slightly larger amount of blue paint. Now I've done some colour mixing on my lids before, as you can see, so we'll be using our lids to mix today. So choose a clean lid, full brush of blue paint and full brush of red paint, slightly larger amount of blue. Now that will create a lovely purple shade. I'm going to rest my big brush aside and take my clean, smaller brush now. And this dark purple that I have made is going to create some lines and some shadows in the magnolia stems. So we'll move on to the background after we've done this step. On the very tip of the brush, paint thin lines very lightly onto some of the large petal edges on both your open flower and your bud. It's not a colouring in, so we're not going to trace the edges all the way around. We're just going to suggest lines here and there. Purple is a great shadowing colour. So I'm going to separate these petals on my bud just by doing that faint line just there. And then I'm going to dip my brush back in again and suggest a little bit of a crease of a shadow on the right hand side of this largest petal on the open flower, the open magnolia. And then I'm going to take a crease over here, and where the lovely magnolia opens up with the stamen, I'm going to paint 3 right dots on the right hand side kind of stroked dots, so stroked lines on the right hand side of the largest petal on the open flower, just to suggest a hint of, you can see that stamen coming through on the right hand side of the edge of that petal. I'm going to paint a little crease line on this petal here, and also on the petal that's falling down onto the right hand side. And a little bit of that purple has now moved into my white, and I'm just going to paint some shadow on the right hand side, just here. Just move my brush back and forth to blend it into those other colours. And I'll do the same up here on this uppermost petal towards the top of the painting. Softly blending with the tips of my small brush. Also, I'm going to go back to the bud now and paint a little bit of an indentation. Just blending softly with the tips of the little brush. Just back and forth, wiggle the brush back and forth, so that that white paint that's already there blends in. Now our magnolias are done. And you can wash both, actually, you can wash your small brush and dampen it dry. Now we're going to use the big brush that we set aside, that has the purple paint on it, and we're going to add a 20 cent amount of white. So I'll get my white paint out with a clean brush, and I'm going to use my big brush that already has the purple paint on it. If you've washed it off, that's fine. You can just repaint it again. And I'm going to mix that purple with the white to create a medium purple shading colour. And we're going to move into doing the background now. I'm going to go to the left of my main stem. And start wiggling the brush back and forwards. Now you can go off in different directions, so vary your brush stroke to add a little bit of texture. And as you work your way towards where you've already painted the stem and the bud form, just be careful and go lightly. And we can also go forwards and backwards in a cross hash. Now we're not outlining or tracing, but we're just adding a little bit of depth and dimension into our painting. By adding a little bit of background. Now if this is the step that you would rather skip, I think you could possibly have more of a minimalist finish painting without the background. So I'm being quite rough and pressing quite hard with the brush, big brush, moving it backwards and forwards in different directions to get some of that lovely purple colour into my background. Now we're not going to fill in the whole of the background because we want to leave some of that lovely linen look canvas coming through. Remember, as you get closer to that stem that you've already painted in, just go lightly with the tips of the brush, be a little bit neater with your placement of the paint. Wiggle the brush back and forwards. Now you're going to rinse your brush off and we're going to blend in some of those edges of the purple. So not all of the purple, we'll leave some of the purple there, but we'll soften a lot of those edges and make them lighter and more blended. I'll wash my big brush off. And I'm going to start wiggling white paint around the edges to blend it into a softer, more faded look. So leave some areas of purple. And remember to go more carefully. You can even use your smaller brush as you work around the petals and the stem and the branches that you've already got. Keep working away with the blending. And after you've finished with the purple, we're going to do the same process with the green. So you'll have a 20 cent amount of green paint and a 5 cent amount of white. Now see how my background is quite a different technique and texture to the way I painted the petals on the flower. So that helps the viewer's eye distinguish the main subject to the background more easily. So see how around this area closest to the stem I haven't blended all the colour with white. I've still allowed some of that darker purple to show through. It balances out by adding different colours into the background. It balances out the composition a little bit and allows you to create a more interesting texture in your work. I'm going to rinse out my brush now and get some green paint. So a 20 cent amount of green and a 5 cent amount of white. So I'm just lightening up the green very slightly. Now the green will seem very bright when you first start to put it on, but we're going to go sparsely with the green and just blend it in lightly to some of the purple edges. Not all of the purple edges, just some. This background area is to your taste, so you do as little or as much as you like. And then we're going to add in the white again. So you would wash your large brush, dampen it dry, and get the pure white paint and blend off some of those greener edges. White paint to blend off some of the edges. And the next background colour we're going to do is blue. So we'll do the same process. A 20 cent amount of blue and a 5 cent amount of white. And we'll mix it together with our large brush that's been washed and damp dry, and start adding in touches of blue. Just small amounts. You can dab it over the top of the background that you already have. We're not going right around the flower. We'll add touches here and there. I'm going in between the stems at the moment, where that little twig stem for the bud curls around the main magnolia stem. And we're also going to do the same technique that we've done with the other two background colours. Clean off our large brush and use the white to blend in some of those edges. So white paint to soften some of that blue colour so it's not so bright. Painting needs to have balance, so if the background is too bright compared to the main image, that's all you'll be able to see. Remember, you're wiggling your brush back and forwards to get that blending happening quite vigorously. You just want to step back a little bit and have a look to see if you've got a nice balance happening. Now send me a picture, please, to celebrate your masterpiece. I think mine's finished now. I hope you really loved doing your magnolia painting. So Art by You Mudgee on Facebook. See you again next time. Bye.